This is London. Hours, Greenwich Mean Time.
BBC World Service, the news read by Peter Lewis. The students occupying the American embassy in Tehran are allowing foreign ambassadors to see the conditions in which their hostages are being held. A row has broken out between the South African government and the council it set up to represent the colored community. The arrest of more than 20 dissidents is reported in Poland.
BBC World Service. The news, read by George Eason. All Iranian students in the United States have been ordered to report to the authorities to have their credentials checked. Ayatollah Khamenei has rejected an appeal from the Pope to free the hostages at the American embassy in Tehran. With the London conference on Rhodesia still at a crucial stage, the anniversary of UDI has passed without the usual celebrations in Salisbury. Roman Catholic leaders in Ireland have made a new appeal for peace in the north.
BBC World Service. The news read by Meryl Oxley. All Iranian students in the United States have been ordered to report to the authorities to have their credentials checked. Ayatollah Khamenei has rejected an appeal from the Pope to free the hostages at the American embassy in Tehran. With the London conference on Rhodesia still at a crucial stage, the anniversary of UDI has passed without the usual celebrations in Salisbury. Roman Catholic leaders in Ireland have made a new appeal for peace in the north.
BBC World Service. The news, read by Roger Collinge. President Carter has halted oil imports from Iran because of the seizure of the American embassy there. The Soviet Union has called for strict economies because of unsatisfactory fuel and energy production. The Canadian city of Mississauga is still deserted after the derailment of a train carrying dangerous chemicals, but the fire which followed the crash is said to be coming under control. Israel's coalition government is threatened with a split after a defeat in a debate on abortion. BBC World Service. The news by Lawrence Reeve Jones. President Carter has halted oil imports from Iran because of the seizure of the American embassy there. The Soviet Union has called for strict economies because of unsatisfactory fuel and energy production. The Canadian city of Mississauga is still deserted after the derailment of a train carrying dangerous chemicals, but the fire which followed the crash is said to be coming under control. Mrs. Thatcher has defended her criticisms of the Soviet military build-up.
BBC World Service presents News Desk, and here's the world news read by John Gordon. The American State Department says it's in direct touch with the Iranians holding the hostages in Tehran. The Vietnamese are holding up a big Oxfam consignment of aid for Kampuchea. More than 20 people are feared to have died when an explosion destroyed part of a hospital in the Italian city of Parma. The government has announced that there will be no cuts after all in the BBC's foreign language broadcasts, at least in the coming year. And now here with correspondence reports is Peter Reynolds.
And we begin with the announcement by the State Department in Washington that it is in direct contact by telephone with the militants holding the hostages at the American embassy in Tehran. The disclosure was that messages were being passed to the hostages. It seems, however, that there have been no negotiations as such with the militants. Clive Small in Washington.
BBC World Service. The news, read by Pamela Creighton. All the American hostages at the American embassy in Tehran are still being held, some 12 hours after the order by Ayatollah Khomeini that some of them be freed. In another development, the Iranian authorities say that from now on, the taking of hostages will be regarded as counter-revolutionary. The United States is resuming aid to Bolivia now that constitutional government has been restored there. Two rival Rhodesian leaders have been speaking about mutual relations between Zimbabwe and South Africa.
BBC World Service. The news, read by Peter King. There are signs that some of the hostages at the American Embassy in Tehran may be about to be released. In another development, the Iranian authorities say that from now on, militant action in industry will be regarded as counter-revolutionary. In the United States, Mr. Ronald Reagan's hopes of becoming the Republican Party's presidential candidate have been given encouragement by a poll in Florida.
And now news about Britain, read by Frederick Payne. The former Soviet spy, Professor Anthony Blunt, who's been staying at a secret address somewhere in England since he was publicly named by the Prime Minister in Parliament last week, says he's prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation into the case. In a statement issued through his solicitor, Professor Blunt said he intended to stay in Britain and resume his work as an art historian.
BBC World Service. The news, read by Brian Empringham. The Soviet Foreign Minister, Mr. Gromyko, has warned NATO that the deployment of new American nuclear missiles in Western Europe would destroy the basis for future arms talks. The British Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, has said the London conference on Zimbabwe-Rhodesia is very close to success. President Carter has again spoken of serious consequences if any of the American hostages in Tehran are harmed. Now here with correspondence reports is Meryl O'Keefe.
It took some hours before the Security Council finally adopted by consensus the resolution condemning the raids by Zimbabwe-Rhodesia forces inside Zambia. The main reason for all the delays in the Council's discussions was that meetings at the highest level had to be held in London to decide Britain's attitude. Peter Nettleship reports now from the United Nations.
BBC World Service. The news, read by Barry Moss. The United Nations Security Council has condemned the latest raids by Zimbabwe-Rhodesian troops into Zambia. An earthquake has struck Colombia, killing about 30 people. Foreign ambassadors in Pakistan are meeting today to discuss security at their embassies. Finance ministers of the European Community have rejected a plan by the European Parliament to cut the budget.
BBC World Service. The news, read by John Wing. Saudi Arabia says its troops have regained control of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. Iranian students holding the United States Embassy in Tehran have allowed an American congressman into the building. Leaders of the Patriotic Front say they'll not meet Britain's deadline for a decision on the Rhodesian ceasefire proposals. A Kampuchean anti-communist group is reported to be trying to stop refugees leaving camps on the Thai border for safer areas.
Now here with correspondence reports is Keith Bosley.
Where will the deposed Shah of Iran find refuge now that he appears to be well enough to leave hospital in New York? Mexico has said that it doesn't want him back there, but Egypt is still ready to give him a home. From New York, Paul Reynolds reports.
BBC World Service. The news read by Peter Shoesmith. The Iranians are to send an envoy to the United Nations, but they say he will not be holding negotiations on the crisis in relations with the Americans. The United States Embassy in Libya has been attacked by demonstrators. The Saudi Arabians have confirmed that a group of gunmen are still inside the Grand Mosque in Mecca. In the Portuguese general election, a right-wing alliance has taken an early lead. Investigators have found the flight recorder of the New Zealand DC-10 airliner, which crashed in the Antarctic.
BBC World Service presents News Desk. Michael Ashbee with the World News. With agreement still not reached at the Rhodesia conference, Britain is pressing ahead with its settlement plans.
but it says the door is still open to the patriotic front. The Saudi Arabians say the Grand Mosque in Mecca has now been completely cleared of gunmen. The Thai authorities have sent tanks to a border area where 2 Kampuchean forces have been involved in fighting. Several people are feared to have been killed when panic broke out at a rock concert in the United States.
And now news about Britain, read by Spink. Religious leaders in Britain have expressed grave concern about the government's plans for changes in the immigration laws, which will be debated in Parliament today. One of the proposals is to end the right of entry to Britain of husbands and fiancés of women who have British nationality but who were not born in this country.